Then make sure your camera is recording, Naomi Brooks said, and for the first time that evening, the smile disappeared from Officer Ryan Keller's face. The parking lot outside the convenience store had become strangely quiet despite the steady traffic moving along the avenue behind them. Rain from an earlier summer storm still covered the pavement in thin silver patches, reflecting the white storefront lights and the red glow of passing brake lights. Naomi stood beside her dark sedan wearing jeans, a navy blouse, and a lightweight jacket, her small leather purse resting against her side. Nothing about her appearance announced that she had spent 12 years in law enforcement. Nothing showed the rank she carried Monday through Friday. Tonight, she was simply a black woman trying to get home. Ryan stood about 6 feet away in uniform, his posture rigid, while his partner, Officer Mark Collins, remained closer to their patrol vehicle. A few customers lingered near the entrance, pretending not to watch. Sarah Mitchell, the store employee who had made the original call, stood behind the glass doors with concern growing across her face. Ryan glanced down at the body camera mounted on his uniform. A small indicator showed that it was active. "You seem awfully interested in police procedure," he said. Naomi met his eyes. "I am interested in facts." Mark looked away, but Ryan gave a short laugh. Everybody becomes an expert when officers start asking questions. Naomi did not respond. She had already provided identification. She had already explained why she was there. She had already told Ryan that the unattended bag near the curb did not belong to her. Sarah had even tried to explain that she had never accused Naomi of taking anything. Yet every answer seemed to produce another question. Ryan took a slow breath. "Let us try this again. Why were you standing near the bag?" "Because my car is parked near it." "And you expect me to believe that is all?" Naomi's expression barely changed. "I expect you to verify it." Ryan glanced toward Mark as though Naomi had delivered a punchline. "Hear that? She is going to teach us how to investigate now." Mark managed a faint smile, but it vanished quickly. Naomi noticed. She noticed everything. The surveillance camera above the entrance. Sarah watching from inside. The body camera on Ryan's chest. The second camera on Mark's uniform. The distance between the abandoned bag and her vehicle. The fact that nobody had actually said they saw her touch it. Years of police work had taught Naomi that assumptions became dangerous when people started treating them like evidence. "Officer Keller," she said calmly, reading the nameplate above his pocket. "Your witness is inside. The store has exterior cameras. My identification is valid. You have several ways to establish what happened." Ryan's jaw tightened. "You do not tell me how to do my job." Naomi held his gaze. "I did not. It sounded like you did." A customer near the entrance lowered his phone and stared. Another woman stopped beside the ice machine. Naomi could feel the moment becoming public, but she refused to give Ryan the anger he seemed prepared to interpret as guilt. Instead, she looked once more at the small camera on his chest. "Good," she said quietly. Ryan frowned. "What is that supposed to mean?" Naomi's voice remained steady. "It means there will be a record of what happened here." Ryan stared at her, convinced he still controlled the situation. What he did not know was that the woman standing in front of him had written incident reports, supervised officers, reviewed body camera footage, and testified about procedure more times than he could imagine. More importantly, Naomi had not yet told him who she was. She wanted to see whether the truth would matter before her title did. 20 minutes earlier, Naomi Brooks had been thinking about nothing more complicated than coffee, a quiet drive home, and whether she had enough energy to answer the emails waiting on her kitchen table. The community youth meeting had ended later than expected, but she had stayed because a 17-year-old named Jordan wanted advice about applying to college. Naomi never rushed those conversations. 12 years in law enforcement had taught her that sometimes the most important part of public service happened when nobody was watching. By the time she left the community center, the summer storm had already passed over Richmond, leaving the streets wet and the evening air heavy. Naomi had been off duty for hours. Her uniform was at home, and she wore dark jeans, a navy blouse, a lightweight jacket, and comfortable shoes. Her department credentials and badge were tucked inside her leather purse, out of sight. She had no reason to display them. Tonight, she was not Sergeant Brooks supervising officers or reviewing reports. She was simply Naomi, heading home after a long day. A few miles from the community center, she stopped at a brightly lit convenience store for coffee and bottled water. The parking lot was half full. Music played quietly from a sedan near the gas pumps. A delivery driver pushed a hand truck toward the side entrance. Inside, Sarah Mitchell stood behind the register helping an older customer while another employee restocked a refrigerator. Naomi poured herself a medium coffee, added cream, paid, and thanked Sarah before walking back outside. She had nearly reached her car when she noticed a dark canvas bag sitting near the curb, about 8 feet from her driver's door. Naomi stopped. She did not touch it. She looked around for someone who might have forgotten it, but the nearest customers were already moving toward their vehicles. After a few seconds, Sarah came through the entrance and noticed Naomi standing nearby. "Is that yours?" she asked. "No," Naomi replied. "It was here when I came out." Sarah frowned. "I have not seen it before." Naomi glanced toward the security camera above the entrance. "You probably have exterior footage." Sarah nodded. "We do." Neither woman sounded alarmed. It looked like an ordinary forgotten bag, the kind someone might realize was missing 10 minutes after driving away. Still, Sarah explained that store policy required employees to report unattended property if the owner could not be located. Naomi understood. "That makes sense," she said. "I can move my car if you need the area clear." Sarah shook her head. "You are fine. I am just going to call the non-emergency number and let them know." Naomi nodded and waited near her vehicle while Sarah returned. Inside, she could have left. She had purchased her coffee. Nobody had accused her of anything. But Naomi knew the camera footage might show who had placed the bag there, and she thought staying for a few minutes could help Sarah explain the timeline. About 7 minutes later, a patrol vehicle turned into the parking lot. No emergency lights. No siren. 2 uniformed officers stepped out. Officer Ryan Keller walked toward the curb, while Officer Mark Collins followed several steps behind. Sarah came outside to meet them. Naomi expected them to ask about the bag. Instead, Ryan looked past Sarah and focused immediately on Naomi. His eyes moved from her face to her purse, then toward the unattended canvas bag. "Ma'am," he said, "stay right where you are." Naomi slowly lowered her coffee from her lips. Something in his tone told her the simple evening she had expected was already beginning to change. Ryan Keller kept his attention on Naomi while Mark Collins moved toward the unattended canvas bag, and Sarah stepped out from the store entrance. "Officer, I am the one who called," Sarah said. Ryan gave her a quick glance. "We will get to you in a moment." Then he turned back to Naomi. "What is your name?" "Naomi Brooks." "Identification?" Naomi slowly opened her purse, removed her driver's license, and held it where Ryan could see it. She was careful with every movement, not because she was nervous, but because she understood how quickly ordinary gestures could be misread once suspicion had entered an encounter. Ryan took the license and examined it. "Richmond address?" "Yes." "What are you doing over here?" Naomi looked toward the store. "Buying coffee." Ryan glanced at the cup resting on the roof of her car. "And the bag?" "It is not mine." Sarah stepped forward again. "I asked her about it before I called. She told me the same thing." Ryan finally looked at Sarah. "Did you see her near it?" Sarah seemed confused by the question. "Her car is near it. She was walking toward her car when we noticed it." "Did you see her put it there?" Mark asked from several feet away. Sarah shook her head. "No, I never said she did." Naomi watched Ryan carefully. That should have narrowed the situation immediately. Instead, he returned his attention to her. "How long were you inside the store?" "About 5 minutes." "Anybody with you?" "No." "Where were you before that?" Naomi paused. "At a community center." Ryan tilted his head. "Doing what?" "Attending a youth mentoring meeting." The answer seemed to produce a faint smile that Naomi could not quite read. "And then you came straight here?" "Yes." Ryan looked at Mark. "Convenient." Naomi's eyes narrowed slightly. "What is convenient?" Ryan ignored the question and handed her license to Mark. "Run that." Mark walked toward the patrol vehicle. Naomi remained beside her sedan while traffic moved along the avenue beyond the parking lot. The wet pavement reflected the store lights, and the smell of rain mixed with gasoline from the pumps. Sarah folded her arms, clearly uncomfortable now. "Officer Keller, there are cameras outside," she said. "The one above the entrance covers most of this area." Naomi looked toward the camera. "That should show when the bag appeared." Ryan followed her gaze. "We know how cameras work, ma'am." Naomi said nothing. Sarah looked at him, surprised by the tone. A moment later, Mark returned. "License is valid. Nothing outstanding." Ryan nodded, but his posture did not change. "All right, Ms. Brooks. You seem to know quite a bit about what we should be checking." Naomi kept her voice even. I pointed out a camera. You also told us how to establish the timeline. Because you asked what happened. Ryan gave a short laugh. You watch a lot of police shows? Mark smiled automatically, then seemed to regret it. Naomi looked directly at Ryan. She had heard jokes like that before, usually from people who assumed knowledge belonged only to whoever wore the visible uniform. No, she said. I pay attention. Ryan's smile faded. Then pay attention to this. I am asking the questions. Naomi nodded once. Ask them. The answer was calm, almost gentle, and somehow that seemed to bother him more. Sarah stepped closer to the doorway. I can pull up the footage right now. Ryan raised one hand without looking at her. Give us a minute. Naomi watched that decision carefully. The witness was offering evidence. The camera was available. Her identification was clean. Nobody had accused her of touching the bag. Yet Ryan was still studying her as though the facts were interruptions rather than answers. And that was when Naomi understood the encounter had stopped being about unattended property. It had become about the story Ryan had already decided to believe. Naomi let the silence sit between them for a moment. She had learned long ago that people often revealed more when they believed silence belonged to them. Ryan seemed to interpret hers as uncertainty. He stepped slightly to one side, positioning himself between Naomi and the store entrance, while Mark remained near the patrol vehicle with her driver's license. You said you came from a youth mentoring meeting, Ryan said. That is correct. Which community center? Naomi gave him the name and address without hesitation. Ryan nodded slowly, but there was no sign that the answer satisfied him. What time did you leave? A little after 7:30. And you drove directly here? Yes. No stops. No. Naomi watched his expression carefully. Each answer was clear. Each answer arrived immediately. Yet every response seemed to create another question unrelated to the unattended bag sitting near the curb. Sarah stood near the entrance with growing impatience. Officer Keller, I really can show you the video, she said. The exterior camera covers the parking spaces. Ryan looked toward her. Did you personally watch the footage? Not yet. Then you do not know what it shows. Sarah blinked. That is why I am offering to pull it up. Mark lowered his eyes for a second. Naomi noticed that too. Ryan turned back toward her. Were you aware of the bag before you walked outside? No. Did anyone inside speak to you about it? No. Did you see anyone leave it there? No. Ryan folded his arms. So you cannot tell me where it came from. Neither can you, Naomi replied. His expression hardened. Excuse me. Naomi kept her voice level. There is no witness saying I placed it there. There is no witness saying I touched it. The store has surveillance footage that may show when it appeared. Those are the facts available right now. Ryan stared at her for a long second. You have an answer for everything. You keep asking questions. Mark looked toward the storefront as if trying to hide a reaction. Ryan noticed. Something funny? No, Mark said quickly. Then he looked at Sarah. How far back can your system go? Weeks, she answered. Tonight will be easy. Mark nodded. Maybe we should take a look. Ryan did not answer immediately. A pickup truck rolled slowly through the lot before turning toward the gas pumps. Two customers leaving the store glanced toward Naomi and the officers. What had begun as a routine call was becoming a public scene, and Naomi could feel the attention gathering around them. Ryan finally spoke. We will check it if we need to. Naomi looked at him. What would make you need to? I decide what is relevant here. The video could establish who left the bag. And I said we will get to it. Naomi took a slow breath. She knew that tone. Not from criminals. Not from suspects. From officers who confused authority with certainty. She had corrected younger officers for exactly that mistake during training sessions. Start with evidence. Separate observation from assumption. Do not build facts around a conclusion you already prefer. But Ryan did not know any of that about her. To him, she was simply a black woman in a parking lot who seemed too comfortable questioning his reasoning. Mark walked back and returned Naomi's license. Everything checks out. Naomi accepted it and placed it carefully inside her purse. Ryan watched her. You know, most people just answer the questions and let us do our jobs. Naomi met his eyes. I have answered every question. Then why do you keep challenging the process? Because the process should follow the evidence. Ryan gave a quiet laugh and looked toward Mark. There it is again. Mark did not laugh this time. Naomi glanced at Sarah, then at the surveillance camera above the entrance, and finally at the body camera mounted on Ryan's chest. A small light confirmed it was recording. She understood something Ryan still did not. He thought her knowledge was the problem. Naomi knew. The real problem was that he had been given several opportunities to test his assumption, and each time, he had chosen the assumption instead. Ryan glanced toward the unattended bag, then back at Naomi as though he were waiting for her composure to crack. It did not. The coffee on the roof of her sedan had gone untouched, steam no longer rising from the lid, while the parking lot around them continued its ordinary evening rhythm. Cars entered beneath the bright convenience store sign. Customers crossed toward the glass doors. Somewhere near the gas pumps, a radio played softly through an open window. Yet inside the small circle around Naomi, every second felt increasingly deliberate. You said the process should follow the evidence, Ryan said. Yes. That sounds like something you rehearsed. Naomi studied him. Why would I rehearse that? Ryan gave a thin smile. Maybe you spend a lot of time dealing with police. Mark shifted his weight beside the patrol vehicle. Sarah remained near the entrance, visibly uncomfortable. Naomi could have reached into her purse and ended the guessing immediately. Her department credentials were there. Her badge was there. One simple movement could have transformed Ryan's expression. But she did not want professional status to become the reason her explanation suddenly deserved respect. I told you where I was, Naomi said. You verified my identification. Your witness told you she never saw me touch the bag. She offered surveillance footage. What exactly are you trying to establish now? Ryan's smile disappeared. Whether your story checks out. Which part does not? He paused. That is what we are determining. Using what information? Mark looked toward Ryan. The question was simple, but the silence after it was not. Ryan finally said, You know a lot about police work for someone standing in a convenience store parking lot. Naomi held his gaze. Is knowing police procedure suspicious? Mark looked down. Sarah stepped forward. Officer Keller, she was helping me. She could have driven away before you arrived. I asked if the bag belonged to her, and she said no. That is all that happened. Ryan turned toward Sarah. You called us because you were concerned. About the bag, Sarah said. Not about her. The distinction hung in the damp evening air. Ryan looked back at Naomi. People sometimes stay around because leaving would look suspicious. Naomi's expression tightened for the first time. Not anger. Recognition. She had heard the logic before. Stay, and your presence becomes suspicious. Leave, and your departure becomes suspicious. Explain yourself, and you know too much. Remain silent, and you must be hiding something. It was a circle designed so every road returned to the same conclusion. So if I had left, that would concern you, Naomi said. And because I stayed, that concerns you too? Ryan shrugged. I did not say that. You just did. Mark cleared his throat. Ryan, we could watch the footage and probably settle this in a few minutes. Ryan looked at him sharply. I said we will get there. Mark did not respond. Naomi glanced toward the body camera mounted on Ryan's uniform. Its indicator remained active. Then she looked toward Mark's camera. Active too. She felt something inside her settle. There was no need to argue harder. No need to prove she understood procedure. The record was building itself. Ryan mistook her silence for retreat. That is better, he said. Just let us handle this. Naomi looked at him. I have been letting you handle it. A customer walking toward the entrance slowed after hearing the exchange. Ryan noticed the growing audience and lowered his voice. Then stop making this more difficult than it needs to be. Naomi answered just as quietly. I am not the one refusing to look at the evidence. Mark's face changed. Sarah stared at Ryan, waiting. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Naomi understood exactly where they were now. This was no longer a misunderstanding waiting to be solved. The solution had been offered repeatedly. What remained was a choice, and Ryan kept choosing suspicion. Ryan remained silent for several seconds, staring at Naomi as the rainwater beneath the parking lot lights shimmered around their shoes. Then he looked toward Sarah. You said she was already outside when you noticed the bag? Yes, Sarah answered. But I never said she had anything to do with it. Ryan nodded as though he had heard only the first half. And nobody else was standing near it? Sarah frowned. Not when I came outside. But people had been coming and going all evening. Naomi watched the distinction disappear inside Ryan's reasoning. Being near something had quietly become evidence of involvement, even though the parking space beside the bag belonged to her car. Officer Keller, Naomi said, am I being detained? Ryan's eyes narrowed. Why are you asking? Because my identification is valid, The caller has said she did not accuse me of anything, and there is surveillance footage available. I would like to understand my status. Mark looked toward Ryan, waiting for the answer. Ryan hesitated. We are still investigating. That does not answer my question. You seem very eager to leave. Naomi glanced at Sarah, then back at him. 10 minutes ago, staying here made me suspicious. Now asking whether I am free to leave makes me suspicious. Mark shifted uncomfortably. Sarah shook her head. This is not what I called about. Ryan ignored her. Nobody said you were a suspect. Naomi's voice stayed calm. Then why are you treating me like one? The question landed harder than any raised voice could have. Ryan looked toward the small group of customers near the entrance and lowered his tone. You are making assumptions about what we are doing. I am asking you to explain what you are doing. Mark stepped closer. Ryan, Sarah can show us the video. We could clear up the timeline. This time Ryan did not immediately dismiss him. He glanced toward the store, then toward Naomi. Fine. We will look at it. Sarah turned toward the entrance, but Ryan added, after I finish here. Naomi almost smiled at the contradiction, but she stopped herself. Finish what? Ryan exhaled. You really cannot help yourself, can you? I am trying to understand what information you still need. Maybe I want to know why someone who claims she was only buying coffee is analyzing every step of an investigation. Naomi felt the weight of the moment settle into clarity. There it was again. Her knowledge itself had become suspicious. Understanding procedure is not evidence of wrongdoing, she said. Ryan gave a brief laugh. You sound like you swallowed a training manual. Mark's expression changed immediately. Sarah stared at Ryan. A man standing near the entrance looked up from his phone. Naomi did not react. She simply looked at Ryan's body camera, then at Mark's. Both indicators were still active. Maybe she is a lawyer, Mark said quietly, attempting to soften the exchange. Ryan smirked. Or maybe everybody thinks they are an expert now. Naomi let the words remain exactly where he had placed them. She did not reach for her badge. She did not mention her rank. She did not explain that she had trained officers on investigative stops, report writing, evidence evaluation, and professional conduct. Instead, she asked the simplest question available. What fact connects me to that bag? Ryan opened his mouth, then stopped. Sarah answered before he could. None that I gave you. Mark looked toward the store. And we have footage. Ryan's face tightened. For the first time, the disagreement was no longer Naomi against his authority. His own partner and the original caller were pointing toward the same evidence. Naomi remained still, her hands relaxed at her sides. Ryan had wanted control of the narrative. But narratives were fragile things when facts finally entered the room. For the first time since the patrol car entered the parking lot, Naomi stopped trying to help Ryan reach the obvious answer. She had given him her identification. Sarah had explained why she called. Mark had suggested reviewing the surveillance footage. No witness had connected Naomi to the unattended bag, and no information had contradicted her account. There was nothing left to clarify with another explanation. So Naomi became quiet. Ryan seemed almost relieved. Good, he said. Now we are getting somewhere. Naomi said nothing. She looked toward the convenience store entrance where Sarah stood beneath the bright white lights, then toward the camera mounted above the glass doors. Its angle covered the curb, the nearest parking spaces, and most of the walkway. A second camera faced the gas pumps. Between those cameras, and the body cameras worn by Ryan and Mark, the evening had more witnesses than Ryan seemed willing to acknowledge. Mark glanced at Naomi. Something about her silence appeared to make him more uncomfortable than her questions had. Sarah, he said, how long would it take to pull the footage? Maybe 2 minutes. Ryan turned toward him. We are not done. Done with what? Mark asked. His voice was respectful, but the question carried weight. Ryan looked briefly surprised. Establishing what happened. Mark glanced at the bag. The video could establish that. Ryan pressed his lips together. Naomi watched without interfering. She understood what was happening now. Ryan had started the encounter believing his instincts deserved priority. Every fact that challenged those instincts had become something to postpone. Sarah's statement could wait. The surveillance footage could wait. Naomi's valid identification was not enough. Her willingness to remain at the scene was suspicious, but so was asking whether she could leave. The standard moved each time she reached it. Ryan turned back toward Naomi. You got quiet all of a sudden. She met his eyes. You asked me to let you handle it. That is right. So handle it. Mark looked away, hiding the beginning of a reaction. Ryan stared at her. You think this is funny? No. You think you know better than us? Naomi paused. I think the evidence is 10 yards behind you. Sarah folded her arms. She is right. Ryan looked toward the entrance, clearly irritated that the conversation was no longer moving in the direction he expected. A middle-aged man leaving the store stopped several feet away and pretended to check his phone. Another customer remained near the ice machine. Nobody interfered, but the audience was growing. Ryan noticed them too. Everyone needs to keep moving, he said. The customers slowly stepped away, although several continued watching from a distance. Naomi's eyes returned to Ryan's body camera. The indicator light remained steady. She remembered telling recruits that cameras did not choose sides. They preserved moments. Sometimes they protected officers from false accusations. Sometimes they revealed mistakes. The value was the same either way. A record existed after emotion faded. Ryan followed her gaze. Why do you keep looking at my camera? Naomi answered carefully. Because it is recording. Does that make you nervous? No. Most people do not like being recorded by police. Naomi's expression remained composed. Tonight, I am grateful for it. Ryan gave a puzzled laugh. You really believe you are proving some kind of point? Naomi shook her head. I do not need to prove a point. She glanced toward Sarah, then Mark, then the surveillance camera. I only need the facts to remain exactly as they are. The confidence in her voice changed something. Mark studied her more closely now, as if trying to understand what Ryan had missed. Ryan still saw silence as surrender. Naomi knew better. Silence was not surrender when the truth had already found 4 cameras and 2 witnesses. Sarah was the first person to break the silence. I want to be completely clear about something, she said, stepping away from the store entrance. Ryan turned toward her with visible impatience, but Sarah continued before he could interrupt. When I called the non-emergency number, I reported an unattended bag. I did not report Ms. Brooks. I did not describe her as suspicious, and I never told anyone that I saw her touch anything. Mark looked at Ryan. Naomi remained beside her sedan, listening. Nobody said you did, Ryan replied. Sarah shook her head. Then why have we spent all this time questioning her instead of checking the bag or the camera? Ryan glanced toward the customers watching from a distance. Ma'am, we are conducting an investigation. I understand that, Sarah said. I am trying to help you conduct it. Mark stepped closer to Ryan and lowered his voice. She has a point. We should review the footage. Ryan's expression tightened. You already said that. Because it is the fastest way to establish the timeline. Naomi noticed the change in Mark. Earlier, he had followed Ryan's lead almost automatically. Now he was looking at the situation as an officer instead of as a partner, trying to avoid disagreement. Ryan turned toward Naomi. You enjoying this? Naomi's expression remained neutral. Enjoying what? Watching everybody tell me how to do my job. I have not asked anyone to say anything. You did not have to. Naomi held his gaze. That is because the facts do not require coordination. Mark looked down briefly. Sarah did not. Come inside, she said to Mark. I can show you the footage. Mark took one step toward the entrance. Ryan stopped him with a sharp look. Hold on. Mark paused. Why? The single word changed the atmosphere. Ryan stared at his partner. Because I am handling this. We are handling it, Mark replied. His tone was calm, but the distinction was unmistakable. And we have a witness offering video. Ryan looked toward the dark canvas bag near the curb, then toward Naomi. Fine. Pull it up. Sarah immediately turned toward the store. Mark followed her inside. Through the glass, Naomi could see Sarah move behind the counter toward a small office, while Mark waited nearby. Ryan remained outside with Naomi. For several seconds, neither spoke. The avenue beyond the parking lot carried a steady stream of headlights through the damp evening. Naomi reached for her coffee, then decided against it. It had gone cold. Ryan finally said, You could have made this easier. Naomi looked at him. How? By answering questions without turning everything into an argument. I answered every question. You challenged me from the beginning. Naomi shook her head. I pointed out evidence. Ryan gave a humorless laugh. Same thing with people like you. The words were quiet, almost casual, but Naomi heard them clearly. So did the camera on his chest. She looked at the small indicator light and then back into his eyes. People like me? Ryan hesitated. People who think knowing a few legal phrases means they can control an investigation. Naomi did not rescue him from what he had said. She simply let the silence remain. Inside the store, Mark appeared at the office doorway and looked through the glass toward them. His expression had changed. Sarah emerged behind him, holding a tablet. Mark pushed open the door and walked outside. "Ryan," he said, "we have the footage." Ryan folded his arms. "And?" Mark glanced at Naomi before answering. "She never touched the bag." Sarah stepped outside behind him. The video shows a man leaving it near the curb about 12 minutes before Naomi walked out of the store. He got into a gray sport utility vehicle and drove away. Ryan stared at Mark. The evidence was finally standing in front of him, clear and uncomplicated. Naomi expected the encounter to end. Instead, Ryan looked at her and said, "That still does not explain why you were so interested in how we handled this." Mark's face fell. Sarah stared at him in disbelief. Naomi felt no surprise at all. The facts had answered the original question. Ryan had simply decided he needed a different one. For several seconds after Ryan spoke, nobody moved. The surveillance footage had answered the only factual question that brought the officers to the parking lot. Yet Ryan stood there as if the answer had somehow created a new problem. Mark looked from Naomi to his partner. "Ryan, the video clears her," he said. "She was never connected to the bag." Ryan kept his eyes on Naomi. "I heard you." Sarah stepped forward. "Then this should be over." Ryan turned toward her. "We still have procedures." "What procedure?" Sarah asked. "She bought coffee. She walked outside. Someone else left the bag before she even came out." Naomi watched Ryan search for another reason to continue. She had seen officers make mistakes before. Everyone did. Good policing was never about pretending mistakes could not happen. It was about recognizing them before pride turned them into something worse. Ryan looked toward Mark and spoke quietly, but not quietly enough. "People like this always change their attitude when police show up." Mark's face tightened. "People like what?" Ryan glanced toward Naomi, apparently realizing the words had traveled farther than intended. "People who want to turn a simple investigation into an argument." Naomi remained still. "My attitude has not changed." Ryan gave a short laugh. "Exactly. You have been difficult from the beginning." Sarah stared at him. "She has been calmer than anyone here." Mark nodded slightly. "She answered everything we asked." Ryan looked at his partner. "Whose side are you on?" Mark's expression hardened. "There are not supposed to be sides." The sentence settled over the parking lot. Naomi glanced toward Ryan's body camera. The indicator was still glowing. Ryan noticed. "There you go again, looking at the camera." "Yes." "Why?" "Because you keep saying things you may want to remember accurately later." Ryan stared at her. Mark lowered his eyes. Sarah took a slow breath. The customers standing farther away had grown quiet enough that Naomi could hear the soft hum of the store's refrigeration units through the open door. Ryan shifted his attention toward Mark. "You know what happens every time we deal with someone who thinks they know the system? They keep pushing until they can claim we did something wrong." Mark did not answer. Naomi did. "I have not claimed anything." "Not yet." "Then perhaps you should stop arguing with something I have not said." Ryan shook his head. Unbelievable. Naomi could have ended his uncertainty right there. Her badge remained inside her purse beside her department credentials. But she still refused to make rank the price of basic fairness. If Ryan needed to discover she supervised officers before he considered her words credible, then the lesson would be smaller than the problem. Ryan looked toward Mark and gestured toward the patrol vehicle. "We will document the bag, get the store information, and close this out." Mark nodded. "And Ms. Brooks?" Ryan glanced at Naomi. "She can wait another minute." Naomi's eyes narrowed. "For what?" "Until we are finished." "Am I being detained?" Again, Ryan hesitated. "Just stay where you are." Naomi looked at Mark. Mark looked uncomfortable, but said nothing. Ryan walked several steps toward the patrol vehicle, then spoke under his breath to his partner. "Give it 60 seconds. People like her usually calm down once they realize we are not playing their game." Naomi heard every word. So did Sarah. So did 2 body cameras. Ryan thought the encounter was almost over. Naomi knew it had just crossed the line that mattered most. The original misunderstanding had been resolved. Everything happening now was a choice. Naomi watched Ryan walk toward the patrol vehicle as though the extra distance might restore the control he had been losing. Mark followed more slowly, but his attention kept returning to Naomi and Sarah. The abandoned bag was no longer a mystery. The store footage had shown exactly who left it. The original caller had confirmed Naomi was never reported as suspicious. Her identification had already been verified. By any reasonable standard, her role in the incident was finished. Yet Ryan had still told her to wait. Naomi looked at her cold coffee, then at the dashboard clock visible through her car window. She had already given this encounter more time than the facts required. "Officer Keller," she called. Ryan turned. "What?" "I am asking one more time. Am I being detained?" Mark stopped walking. Sarah remained near the entrance, listening carefully. Ryan hesitated before answering. "We are wrapping things up." "That was not my question." His jaw tightened. "Why are you so determined to make everything technical?" Naomi almost smiled, but there was nothing amusing about it. "Because words matter when authority is involved." Ryan walked back several steps. "You want to leave that badly?" "I want a clear answer." "You have somewhere important to be?" Naomi looked directly at him. "That is not relevant." Ryan gave a short laugh. "There it is again." Mark spoke before Naomi could respond. "Ryan, if she is not being detained, we should tell her she is free to go." Ryan turned toward his partner. "I know how this works." "Then answer her." The parking lot became quiet again. Naomi could hear tires moving across the wet pavement near the gas pumps. She could hear the automatic doors opening behind Sarah. She could even hear the faint electronic chatter from the patrol radio. Ryan looked from Mark to Naomi. "Fine. You are not under arrest." Naomi's expression did not change. "That is different from what I asked." Sarah exhaled sharply. Mark closed his eyes for half a second. Ryan stared at Naomi as though she had deliberately embarrassed him. "You really enjoy this, do you not?" "No. Could have fooled me." Naomi glanced at his body camera. "Still recording." "Officer Keller, may I make a phone call?" Ryan laughed. "A phone call?" "Yes." "To who?" "Your attorney." "May I make the call?" Ryan looked toward Mark with an expression that suggested the request proved everything he believed about Naomi. "Go ahead," he said. "Call whoever you want." Naomi reached slowly into her purse. Her fingers passed the leather case containing her badge and stopped at her phone. She removed only the phone. Ryan watched closely. Naomi opened her contacts, but she did not scroll. She knew the number by memory. 12 years in the department had made certain numbers impossible to forget. She entered it manually. Mark noticed. His expression changed slightly. "Who are you calling?" Ryan asked. Naomi pressed the call button. "Someone who can answer a question." "What question?" She lifted the phone to her ear. "Whether this encounter is being handled according to department policy." Ryan gave another dismissive laugh. "Department policy? You really are committed to this act." Naomi said nothing. The line rang once, twice. Then someone answered. "Command desk, Captain Price speaking." Naomi's posture remained relaxed. "Captain, this is Naomi Brooks." There was a brief silence on the line, followed by an immediate change in the captain's voice. "Sergeant Brooks? Is everything all right?" Mark's head lifted. Ryan's smile disappeared. Naomi looked directly at him. She had not raised her voice. She had not displayed her badge. She had not demanded special treatment. She had simply made one phone call. "I am off duty at a convenience store on West Broad Street," Naomi said. 2 patrol officers responded to an unattended property call. "The original issue has been resolved, but I need a supervisor to verify the call record and preserve the body camera footage." Ryan stared at her. Mark slowly turned toward his partner. On the other end of the line, Captain Evelyn Price became completely serious. "Give me the unit names." Naomi never looked away from Ryan. "Officer Ryan Keller and Officer Mark Collins." The silence that followed was different from every silence before it. This time, Ryan finally understood that the woman he had been mocking knew the system because she was part of it. Captain Evelyn Price did not waste time asking Naomi whether she was certain. She knew Sergeant Brooks well enough to understand that Naomi would not call the command desk over wounded pride. "Stay on the line," Evelyn said. "I am checking the dispatch record now." Naomi lowered the phone slightly and activated the speaker so everyone could hear without forcing her to repeat anything. Ryan stood several feet away, his expression caught somewhere between disbelief and calculation. Mark looked toward his partner, then toward Naomi, as though pieces of the evening were finally arranging themselves into a picture he wished he had recognized sooner. Sarah remained near the entrance with her arms folded. A few seconds passed before Evelyn returned. "Sergeant Brooks, I have the original call." Naomi waited. The caller reported unattended property outside the store. No suspect description was provided. No person was identified as threatening, disruptive, or involved with the bag. Sarah nodded immediately. That is exactly what I told dispatch. Ryan looked toward her, but said nothing. Evelyn continued. I am also seeing the responding unit information. Officer Keller and Officer Collins, can you hear me? Mark answered first. Yes, Captain. Ryan hesitated. Yes, ma'am. The confidence in his voice was gone. Do not deactivate your body cameras, Evelyn said. Do not delete, categorize, or alter any recording associated with this call until a supervisor arrives and completes the preliminary review. Understood, Mark said. Ryan gave the same response a moment later. Naomi watched him carefully. This was the point where she had expected the truth to matter, but not because of her rank. The dispatch record mattered because it existed before anyone knew who she was. Sarah's statement mattered because it had remained consistent. The surveillance footage mattered because it showed a stranger leaving the bag before Naomi ever walked outside. Those facts had been available long before Captain Price answered the phone. Captain, Naomi said, the store has exterior video. Officer Collins reviewed it with the employee. It shows another individual leaving the property near the curb. Copy that, Evelyn replied. Officer Collins, is that accurate? Mark straightened slightly. Yes, Captain. The footage shows a man leaving the bag approximately 12 minutes before Sergeant Brooks exited the store. She does not approach or touch it. And after you established that, was Sergeant Brooks told she was free to leave? Silence. Mark glanced toward Ryan. Ryan stared at the wet pavement. Evelyn waited. Not clearly, Mark finally said. Ryan looked at him. We were finishing the call. Evelyn's voice remained calm. That was not my question. Naomi felt the irony immediately. Only minutes earlier, she had used almost the same words. Ryan swallowed. No, Captain. Understood. There was no anger in Evelyn's response, which somehow made the moment heavier. A field supervisor is approximately 6 minutes away. Remain professional and preserve the scene as it currently stands. Ryan looked at Naomi. Sergeant, I did not realize you were law enforcement. Naomi's face did not soften. That is not the issue. I am saying I would have handled things differently if I had known. Sarah's expression changed instantly. Mark looked down. Naomi stared at Ryan for a long moment. That, she said quietly, is exactly the issue. Ryan opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Naomi continued. You had my identification. You had the caller. You had surveillance footage. You had your partner telling you to review it. None of those facts changed when you learned my rank. Ryan's eyes moved toward his body camera. Naomi followed his gaze. The small indicator was still glowing. Evelyn's voice came through the phone again. Sergeant Brooks is correct. Her employment status does not determine the standard. The parking lot fell silent. Ryan had believed one phone call would reveal who Naomi was. Instead, it revealed something far more uncomfortable. Every fact he needed had been standing in front of him from the beginning. 6 minutes later, a second patrol vehicle turned into the parking lot without lights or sirens. Lieutenant Daniel Mercer stepped out, closed the door, and surveyed the scene before approaching anyone. He was a 20-year department veteran known for asking questions in the order facts happened, not in the order people wished they had happened. Captain Evelyn Price was still on Naomi's phone when Mercer arrived. Lieutenant, Evelyn said through the speaker, preserve all recordings associated with this call, obtain the store footage, and conduct a preliminary review before anyone clears. Understood, Captain, Mercer replied. Naomi ended the call and placed her phone inside her purse. Mercer first spoke with Sarah. He asked what she had reported, what she had personally observed, and when Naomi became part of the conversation. Sarah answered each question plainly. She was never part of my complaint, she said. I called because of the bag. Mercer then reviewed the exterior video with Sarah and Mark. The timeline was unmistakable. A man in a gray jacket had placed the canvas bag near the curb, entered a gray sport utility vehicle, and driven away. Approximately 12 minutes later, Naomi exited the store carrying coffee and noticed the bag near her parking space. She never touched it. Mercer returned outside and looked at Ryan. At what point did you develop reasonable suspicion that Ms. Brooks was connected to the property? Ryan hesitated. She was standing near it when we arrived. Anything else? She seemed unusually familiar with procedure. Mercer held his gaze. Knowledge of procedure is not evidence of involvement. Ryan said nothing. Mercer continued. After the caller told you she had not seen Sergeant Brooks touch the bag, what additional fact connected her to it? Another silence. None directly, Ryan admitted. After the surveillance footage cleared her, why was she still told to remain? Ryan looked toward Naomi, then Mark. I thought her behavior was confrontational. Naomi did not react. Mercer turned to Mark. Officer Collins? Mark took a breath. She was calm. She questioned why we were continuing after the original issue had been resolved. I should have been clearer sooner that the evidence did not support treating her as involved. Mercer nodded once. He did not praise the admission, but he did not ignore it either. Then he looked at Ryan. Sergeant Brooks being. An officer changes nothing about the standards she was owed before you knew who she was. Ryan lowered his eyes. Yes, Lieutenant. Mercer asked Sarah to preserve a copy of the store footage and provided instructions for transferring it through the department's evidence system. He then documented the dispatch record and confirmed that both body cameras had remained active. Nothing dramatic happened. No shouting. No public humiliation. The truth did not need theater. It needed a complete record. Before Mercer released Naomi, Ryan stepped toward her. Sergeant Brooks, I owe you an apology. Naomi looked at him. For what? Ryan seemed surprised by the question. For how I handled this. Be specific. He swallowed. I made assumptions before I had evidence. When information contradicted those assumptions, I kept looking for reasons to justify them. And when I learned you were law enforcement, I treated that like it changed what you deserved. Naomi held his gaze. Would you have recognized that if I had not made the call? Ryan did not answer immediately. Finally, he said, I do not know. That is the question you need to remember. Mark stepped forward next. Sergeant, I should have challenged the direction of the stop earlier. Naomi nodded. Being uncomfortable is not the same as intervening. If you see the facts being ignored, your responsibility does not disappear because another officer is taking the lead. Mark accepted the words quietly. Mercer finally told Naomi she was free to leave. She picked up the coffee she had purchased nearly an hour earlier. It was completely cold now. She looked at it, then at Sarah, and smiled faintly. I think I need another one. Sarah smiled for the first time all evening. Behind them, Ryan stood beneath the parking lot lights while Mercer completed his notes. The badge on Ryan's chest had not changed. The authority behind it had not changed. But for the first time that night, he seemed to understand that authority was never supposed to protect an assumption from the truth. 3 weeks later, Naomi Brooks stood inside the same precinct where she had spent years reminding younger officers that professionalism mattered most. When nobody important appeared to be watching, morning sunlight stretched across the training room windows as Captain Evelyn Price addressed a small group of supervisors. The review of the convenience store encounter had been completed using the dispatch recording, Sarah Mitchell's statement, the store surveillance footage, and both officers' body camera recordings. The findings did not depend on Naomi's memory or Ryan Keller's explanation. The record spoke for itself. Ryan had focused on Naomi without evidence connecting her to the unattended bag, continued questioning after the original caller clarified that Naomi was never the subject of concern, delayed reviewing readily available surveillance footage, and continued the encounter after that footage established that another person had left the property. His remarks had also raised serious concerns about bias and professional judgment. The department placed Ryan on administrative reassignment while he completed remedial training and a formal conduct review. Mark Collins received corrective counseling for failing to intervene sooner, but his eventual effort to redirect the investigation toward evidence was also documented. Naomi had asked for neither officer to be publicly humiliated. She wanted accountability to produce something more useful than embarrassment. Later that afternoon, Ryan requested a private conversation with her. They met in a conference room with the door open. Ryan looked different without the certainty he had carried in the parking lot. I watched the footage, he said. Naomi waited. All of it. More than once. He looked down at his hands. I kept thinking I was protecting the investigation. But every time something proved my assumption wrong, I found another reason to keep the assumption alive. Naomi said nothing. Ryan continued. When I said I would have treated you differently if I knew you were an officer, I thought I was apologizing. You were explaining the problem, Naomi replied. Ryan nodded slowly. I understand that now. Naomi leaned back slightly. Do you? He met her eyes. You should not have needed a badge in your purse to be believed. The room became quiet. Naomi thought. About the parking lot, the cold coffee, Sarah repeatedly offering the surveillance footage, Mark hesitating before finally speaking up, and the small red light on Ryan's body camera preserving every choice. What happens next matters more than what you understand today, she said. The next person you stop may not know policy. They may not know which questions to ask. They may not have a captain who recognizes their voice. That person deserves the same standard. Ryan nodded. Yes, Sergeant. Naomi corrected him gently. Not because I am a sergeant. Ryan understood. Because they are a person. Several months later, Naomi returned to the community center for another youth mentoring session. Jordan, the teenager she had stayed late to help that night, had received an acceptance letter from a state university. He showed it to her with a smile, so wide that for a moment the parking lot incident felt very far away. On her drive home, Naomi passed the convenience store. She did not stop, but she noticed the bright windows and remembered how ordinary the evening had looked before assumptions changed everything. Justice had not arrived through revenge. It had arrived through a witness who spoke clearly, a partner who finally chose responsibility, cameras that preserved the truth, and a woman who refused to believe dignity should depend on revealing her rank. Ryan had worn a badge that night, but Naomi carried something authority could never manufacture, the patience to let the truth survive long enough to be heard. And sometimes karma does not arrive with noise. Sometimes it simply turns on the record and lets a person meet the consequences of their own choices.